with start again. Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm here with Tierney Larkin. Today, we're going to talk about the pro tips to create better renders on Foyr Neo, and we're just going to give it a few minutes to let people trickle in, and then we'll get started. So I'm really excited to have a guest on. Thank you, Tierney, for joining.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited to see what I can help out with.
Awesome. So guys, do feel free to comment in the chat box. Let us know where you're joining from today, and we'd love to hear it. I also love when I know some of you, so let me know if we've done a demo together. Say hi. We'll start in like another minute.
Okay.
Hi to our new joiners. We'll get started in just a minute. Just giving people time to join before we start talking about rendering. Okay. Do let us know where you're joining from in the chat box. We'd love to say hi. And also, if any questions pop up during the call, we'll do a Q&A at the end. So just add that into the Q&A box rather than the chat box so that it's all in one place. And then Tierney and I will get to it at the end. Okay. Hi, welcome. We're going to get started in just a few seconds, I think. Oops, sorry. Alrighty, guys, we're going to get started. So today we are going to go over pro tips to create better renders on Foyr Neo. We have a special guest with us. It's Tierney Larkin. She is the owner of Larkin Living Spaces, and she's going to give us some of her pro tips. Tierney is a Pittsburgh-based interior designer. She offers a variety of e-design services, and she's also an e-design mentor. So she coaches interior designers on all of the ins and outs of how to best offer virtual design services, both exclusively or as an addition to their current services. Her work has been featured in West Elm and Next Luxury, and her expertise as a thriving mom of 3 boys has been sought out by the Wildly You podcast. As an e-design expert, she uses Foyr Neo exclusively to bring her visions to life, and so she is the absolute perfect person to have on today as we discuss the most exciting part of Foyr Neo, I think, which is the rendering tool. So thank you. Let me just make this a bit larger here. Do be sure to follow Tierney on Instagram, check out her page, and give Foyr a follow, of course, if you are not already. So today's webinar is going to focus on how to get that perfect angle. There's a lot of tools to do this. You can obviously use your cursor and the pan tool, but I also want to hone in on field of view and clip view. These are 2 tools that I find are oftentimes forgotten or kind of glossed over. So I wanted for both of us to show you how you can really use that, how to achieve the perfect lighting for your space. We're going to talk about a good workflow to go through, and we'll each share with you what our process is so that you can streamline it and work even faster. And then any extra little tips and tricks that myself or Tierney have to offer to you, we'll go over that as well. So thank you for joining, Tierney. I will stop sharing my screen now. Do you want to pull up your screen?
Sure. Yeah. And hi, everyone. Thank you, Rachel, for that introduction.
Of course. I'll stop sharing here.
Okay, let me make sure I share. Yeah, I'm going to share my whole desktop so I can.
Perfect. We can see you.
Okay.
And so I guess my first question for you, and you can take this in whatever, whatever makes sense for you, but when you first enter render mode, do you have a workflow or a process that you kind of target each tool in particular order? What does that look like?
Yeah, there's definitely a few things that I check for. So I'll just sort of walk you through. I wanted to point out, wait, I've got this control in the middle of my screen. Let me move that. I wanted to share with you guys sort of my process. And also I know we wanted to work in some tips on lighting. So I thought going through my process, but also showing you an example before I do this would help to explain my process here and how I achieve the best lighting and views for my renders. So if you see here, I have this sort of large light fixture in the room, and I have my preview pulled up on the bottom of the screen. You're just to make sure you are viewing my Neo project, right?
Yes, we can.
Okay, just make sure we're in the right, in the same spot. So one of the first things I do is I check for the lighting, because you want all the different areas of your room to be showed to your client. You don't want there to be dark spots that they can't really see. And one of the things I've noticed is that, if you just use the lighting that might be, if you have one feature light in the room that you're designing, the way the light reflects in the render might not necessarily reflect how it's going to be in real life. So, a large chandelier might in real life light up the entire room, but sometimes in the render, it doesn't appear that way. So I just wanted to show you guys, now there is some natural light in this room, but the actual chandelier doesn't give off a lot of light in the preview of the render. So something I do first is I actually add lighting that isn't actually going to be in my client's space. So I kind of fake it in the render just to brighten up the 3D rendered image so that the client can see all the different areas of the room without there being dark shadows. So I'm going to show you my little trick for doing that. I don't know if anyone else does this, but I just go through and I add some recessed lights. I just sort of like these little ones here, and I throw them in the room, and it helps to light up the whole room. And if they're showing in the actual render, once you're done, you can just Photoshop them out. Just use your healing tool in Photoshop. And that gives you, so now we can also talk about angles here. Yeah. So now getting into, so that's how I get my lighting, and I'll show you when I do the preview how it lights up the space a little bit better. But getting to the right angle, I really like to show a view where it's as if my client's standing in the space, but they can also see as much as possible in the room. So I kind of like to get down to a level where you would, might be standing in the room, looking kind of down into the space, but not, not from the top or anything like that.
Yeah, not like, I always call it like levitating or like security camera view. You don't want to have like camera height so high up.
Yeah.
Like a security camera.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you kind of want to give them the feel of what it's going to be like, when you're actually standing in the space. So I kind of like to get down at an angle, sort of like I'm showing you here, whereas if you're standing, you'd kind of be looking like this. And then we want to make sure that we see as much as possible. So once I get to this space, that's where I use my field of view, which is what you were talking about in your intro. So if you see up here, the field of view, I use that and I widen my field of view so we can get, more of the chandelier in the space, more of the, the sides of the room. And I might just adjust my angle a little bit from there. And then the next thing go ahead.
So when Does it depend entirely on the project, or do you try and keep how many renders you're supplying or providing per room to a certain number? And does that dictate the angle that you achieve or try and achieve?
I try to keep it to a minimum. Like I try to keep it to, you know, 1 or 2 views of the room.
Okay.
Just so I'm not, you know, creating so many renders. So I do like to show most of the room. And I also like to do this because I like to share my work on my social media and my website. And I think it's important to get as much of the room as possible in those in those images. So that's one of the reasons I like to show as much of the room as possible. I try to get an angle that really shows you all of that, while also it's like you're standing in the room. So it feels more natural and you can get a really good feel for the space.
Gotcha.
So the next thing I do is I adjust the sunlight. That's another kind of trick for the lighting. I love that Foyr has the sunlight feature because it really helps to create that real life look in the renders. So your client really feels like they're looking at a picture of their own space. So I like to adjust it so that it's kind of streaming into the room nicely, but you want to be careful if you have, you know, a mirror on the wall or anything like that. If I don't have one here to show you, but it can kind of blur out the space, you know, if you're looking at the mirror, it could kind of blur out the mirror from the reflection. So I kind of just like to make sure the sunlight's coming in, make sure it's coming in through the actual windows. So if you can see, sometimes you can get it kind of up, you know, along the ceiling, depending on where, or like under doors, because it's, you know, poking through little door holes. So I try to make sure it's coming through mostly from just the windows and just sort of streaming into the room to give you that natural sunlight look.
And you make a really good point about reflective surfaces and keeping that in mind. Also, just avoiding spotlighting your sun on any one particular product. So having it stream in and not centering it on just the sofa, because what might happen is you'll find that when you actually take the render, it could overexpose the fabric and kind of whitewash it. So having that kind of gentle, natural sunlight coming in through the space where it's not just like, here's the sofa or here's the mirror and now it's reflecting light or whatever, is a really good point.
Yeah. Trying to make sure I don't forget anything here. Sunlight. Oh, another tip. Don't forget to save your view. Okay. So as I'm going, save your view. And you can give these more descriptive names. Sometimes it'll be like my living room view 1, or from, you know, sometimes it's literally like from television. So I know where I'm looking from. You don't, but you don't want to make all these adjustments into your view and then find that perfect angle and perfect lighting and then realize you have to change something. And then when you go back, you have to set all of that up again. So don't forget to save your views.
And one note that I'll just make to that, I felt so bad a designer made this mistake the other day on the call and it was crushing. So the save view button, there's a drop down. If you just hover your cursor over that icon, you don't have to click on it. It'll then bring up that drop down. So Tierney has already saved this as view 1. If she makes any changes to the lighting or the angle, all she has to do is click on save view and it will update this existing. It'll update this existing view. So you don't need to go to save view as and give it a new name. But if you now get a different angle, don't click save view because then it's going to update this view 1 with the new angle. So make sure you just hover your cursor, select save view as, and that will save it as an entirely new view. So you don't want to make that error and then you have to go back.
I've definitely done that many times. Or just even working too quickly and I'm like, oh, I just saved that. Wait, was that the new view? So anyway, so in this example, I don't need to use that clip view tool, but I will pull up another example where I use that in smaller spaces. It's very helpful. My next thing is probably one of my favorite features of Foyr is the preview render. So I click get preview. I loved when this was added because, you know, sometimes you render and something just doesn't turn out the way you thought it was going to be. So the
I
preview
started
is,
with Foyr pre-render preview.
yeah.
And especially if you're a new user and you're
Yeah.
learning, you go through all of
Yes.
your render credits. So this is
Yeah,
really
same.
nice.
Yeah. When I first started using Foyr, the render preview wasn't an option. And then when they added it, it was like, wow, this is amazing. I'm gonna save so many renders.
Mhm, absolutely.
So I don't know.
So while this is loading, I
Yeah.
just want to make one quick note about the field of view as you're using it. So you'll notice that the default is at 70. And as Tierney increased that number, it zoomed her out and allowed her to see more of the room. One note that I will make about how you guys should discern where your field of view should sit is if you happen to take a render and or where a field of view would maybe be best sitting lower rather than higher. So if you take a render preview or a render and you find that any of your furniture pieces or even the walls, the rug on the floor, whatever it may be, seems like dimensionally not the appropriate dimension, that is just an indication that your field of view is not quite right. So one of the things that I sometimes do is I bring my field of view down and it zooms me in. And then I use my mouse to back away if I'm working in a space and I've taken a render preview and I'm like, you know what, that sofa looks too long or something doesn't look quite right. That's just a matter of playing with your field of view. So at some point today, I can show you guys on my screen the different process, but if you find that that's like a problem that you're having, just try moving your field of view down and that might correct it. I'm sorry. So yeah, the render preview has loaded. So perfect.
Okay, so it's loaded. So it looks a little bit lighter, but I realized I forgot to adjust the actual lighting on the level of lighting before I hit preview. So if you do the preview and it's still not as light as you want, like I keep looking at this corner over here on the left and it still looks a little bit dark to me. So to brighten that up, I'm going to go back to the lighting over here, the lighting tab over here and up the interior lighting level. So I'm going to go to medium and I'm going to save the view just in case I like it. And I click get preview again. So if you add lights and it's still not light enough, I love using that slider of the how bright the interior lighting is. And it depends on the room and the lights that you use to play around with that. I've learned sometimes you can go to high and it's everything's like whitewashed. It's really way too bright. But then if you just play around with the lights that you have and the sunlight that you have, you can usually find a good option.
Mm-hmm. And so one note to what you just said about that, where sometimes it's really bright and sometimes not, the way that the auto lighting works in Foyr right now, and this is getting a bit of a facelift in the next couple of weeks to be more consistent, but the smaller the room, so we're talking actual square footage, the smaller the room, the dimmer the lights are going to be. And then the bigger the room, the brighter the lights are going to be. So that's trying to compensate for the size of the room. But obviously, if you only have one light fixture, it still might not be bright enough to accommodate that entire space or to accommodate, like you have like those nice niches in your wall, that kind of shadow that's being created by having that indent. So this is much brighter, you can already tell.
Yeah. So so those are just some tricks I use to get the lighting right. And then you can tell in the preview as well, you can see that sunlight coming in, which just has a really nice natural sunlight look to it. So that helps your client to get a really good feel for, you know, it being really in the space.
Mm-hmm. And the natural shadow that it creates by not going through the chairs over there. It's
yes.
very realistic.
Yeah, it's a really nice feature of the software.
And do you play around any with the different environments that are available and things like that on the lighting drop down?
Oh yeah. So depending on, especially if I have large windows or anything in my space, I do play around with the environments. I had a client recently who was in New York City in a big apartment building. So I use the, city afternoon environment.
Oh, this one's so funny. People always talk about this because it's literally pointed at the camera right now through your window.
Oh, I'm like, wait a minute.
But you can rotate it.
No, you can rotate it. Wait, where did the rotate?
So
Oh,
just
there.
click on it once more.
Like, there we
you
go. Okay. Yeah, so you
There
can
you go.
rotate it around. So I try to get a view outside of the windows that, you know, represents somewhat well where my client is.
Mhm. And
So
if you
yeah,
guys have any interest in custom environments, just drop it in the Q&A and I can show you guys how to do that later. If you want to have like a specific environment, if your client has something like very distinct outside
yes.
of their window.
Oh, neat. I haven't done any of that yet.
Yeah, I can definitely show everybody that later if there's any interest. Just let me know.
So let's see if we can get, so yeah, so for this specific client, I know I sent them this view, but then I also wanted to show them another angle. So I just kind of do the same thing and just try to get a few angles for them so they can really see the whole space, and this would be a good one. So this would be a good example of using that clip view. Like if I have this really great angle of the room here, but there's obviously a bookshelf in my way. Using the clip view, we'll just it'll start clipping out different pieces and you can go pretty far with it. You probably don't want to go that, but just playing around. If you're in a really small space, you might need to do more, but it's just a nice way to be able to render a different view, but not have to move anything out of the way.
Yeah, so clip view is the difference between like concealer and clip view. Clip view, like you just showed there, it kind of like slices into the space. So I use it a lot if I'm like backing up to try and take in more of a shot and I hit the wall behind me. As soon as I hit the wall and I just see gray, I use clip view and it'll slice through that wall so I can see through it. And then concealer is, if you've ever used Photoshop to our audience, you can click on like specific items and hide them away using that as well. So it's like two different ways to achieve it, kind of depending on what you're doing, but you can use.
So like if I wanted this view.
Yeah, exactly.
Flip it away and just like you're looking into the room.
And what's nice about that is it allows you to maintain that position where you were. So it's not like you're zooming in, you're just slicing away at what's blocking your view. So it's different from changing your field of view and it's different from using your mouse to scroll in. Awesome. Cool. So let me think about, there were a few, I think lighting tips. So when you brought up adding recessed lighting, did you have anything else you wanted to add right this moment? Or I just wanted to add a few things that I might recommend on that. And then we can always go back to your screen as well.
No, I got through my list of things I definitely wanted to show for the process I go through.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. I know somebody asked about an outside environment, so I will share my screen if that's okay. And we'll do that as well. This will stop other person's screen sharing. Okay, so I'm gonna
maybe if I stop sharing first.
Yeah, turning your screen. Thank you so much. Thanks. Okay. Alrighty, so I'll just use this little dining area as an example. So the first thing is, I think one of you just brought up the field of view, like you guys were having issues with some of the perspective being a little off. So like I said, the default here is 70. If you find that that's too high for your particular room, and this is dependent upon the size of the room and also how close you are to furnishings and rugs, things like that when you take your shot. So that's why the render preview is so useful, but also you can go ahead and bring this down and you'll see as I do that, it does zoom me in. So obviously this is way too close. I want to take in a bigger shot, but this will prevent that stretched warped or just dimensionally inappropriate render. So if you find that that's happening, go ahead and try bringing this down and then just use the scroll on your mouse to back up. And like I was just talking about, I've hit the wall behind me. And as Tierney showed us, I can use clip view and move this ever so slightly to see through. So this kind of becomes a little bit of a dance. I'm going to back up, hit the wall again, clip view my way through until I'm taking in the entirety of the scene that I'd like to see. And you'll see that's kind of an exaggerated view there. And my mouse is lagging. Okay, there we go. Okay, so now I'm backed up. I'm seeing through this wall to take in this larger viewpoint here. If you find, I'm not sure if you guys can see it, if you find that like the outside environment is maybe showing down here or whatnot, do you use your pan tool, which is in the bottom left-hand corner here. And this is like, I call them like mime hands. It'll move you side to side, up and down without orbiting your shot. So you can just grab hold and you can pull this up. This will also increase your camera height or like center yourself if you want to be. And then you can grab your aspect ratio toggles and crop yourself here. Anything in this grayed out area will not show. And so troubleshoot that, see if that helps that issue that you were having. Field of view being high is also really useful. I think Tierney, you spoke about this in like small spaces. So having your field of view higher there is really useful, or in very long, narrow spaces like a galley kitchen, having this higher is where that is also really beneficial. To your point on the lighting. So like I said, with the auto lighting and depending on how much interior lighting you have in the space, it might not be bright enough for you, even if you're increasing, or you might find that it's too bright. So I'm gonna head into 3D mode real quick. And I just wanna show you one thing that we have in the texture catalog, which is literal light. So sometimes what I will do, let's say this room wasn't bright enough. I would go into the texture catalog and just type in light and click enter. And you'll see here that there's some options: low intensity white light, low intensity warm light, depending on what you're looking for. There's all sorts of neon lights here, but you can drag and drop this to a wall. So obviously I wouldn't do it for this wall if I wanted to get this shot, because then this whole wall would be emanating light, right? But I could do it to this wall over here. And then even though I clip view through it, it'll still emanate that light and it'll brighten up my space. If applying it to the entire wall is too harsh, let me just grab that and put that back. You could grab like a wall docked cube from the catalog, drag and drop it, and then apply the light to that.
Oh,
so that it's a little less intense.
trick, yeah.
Yeah, so sometimes this is a nice, and that way, you know, give this a try, see if it works for you. And sometimes if you just apply it to the cube, it's easy because then you can just delete it, or you can move it to a different wall for different renders. But maybe I just do that.
I'm definitely trying that. Yeah.
Now I drag and drop that, and I've got like a little, it's almost like a little like photographer's tool.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking of, is the lights that a photographer uses.
Yeah. So you could always try that as well. But like I said, and I think we're launching this in about 3 weeks or so, the auto lighting is going to be improved so that we run into less of those issues of it being either too dim or overexposed. Okay. I'm trying to think if there was anything. So we talked about the field of view and clip view, some different lighting options. Let me go back into render mode and just think quickly. I'm going to zoom in here. One note about concealer: if you've ever used Photoshop, you'll know that this just hides items away. So avoid using it. Use it on interior items and interior walls. You could even use it on, but avoid using it on exterior walls like this, because what it's going to do is it exposes your render to the outside environment. So the reason that I use clip view on this back wall here is because if I had just used concealer to knock it down, it's essentially like I've bulldozed that wall in real life. It's going to expose your space to an unnatural amount of light. And also, if you had a reflective, say I got rid of the wall behind me, right? If I had a mirror on this wall in my render, it would reflect the outside environment, which we obviously don't want. But if you use clip view, it won't do that. It'll reflect the wall, even though we've sliced through it. So that's how you discern whether or not you're going to use concealer or use clip view. Always use clip view for exterior walls, or you can use them on interior walls as well, but definitely exterior walls. Okay. Alrighty, let's see. I'm going to make sure here. One other tip for the lighting that sometimes is helpful if you're working in a really large space and the lighting is really bright and a little too harsh, or if you're working in an outdoor space and it's overexposed, you can still shoot in daytime, but if you turn the sun off, you see how it dims the room, but it doesn't make it nighttime either. So if you're dealing with a situation of it being too bright, stay in daytime, turn the sun off, and then take a render preview and see if that helps the situation. Okay. Tierney, is anything coming up for you with me explaining those things?
I did have a question. Sorry, maybe you said this, but I was trying to think about it. So if you use the concealer on a light, it will take away that the light won't shine into the room, correct? Yeah, okay.
Yes, correct. And one thing that you can do, so sometimes like we'll use these wall sconces and the chandelier as an example. Sometimes you might find that when you take the render, maybe the chandelier was a white light, but then the wall sconces are like a warm yellow light, and you want them to be consistent. Use that texture and literally, so let me double click on this wall sconce. Let's see. Sometimes you can literally zoom in here and you can apply that light texture. I don't know if it's going to work for this one, to like the bulb, the quote unquote bulb. No, that applies it to the whole thing. Okay. So not in this case, but in a lot of the cases for like the table lamps or even for some chandeliers, you can just apply the light to the inside. Or if the whole thing's going to be lit, when you actually were to take the render, because this chandelier is already a light color, it would be perfectly fine, but it would emit a white light rather than a yellow light if that's what you were going for. So something to keep in mind for anything, like if you have like a very dark wall sconce, you wouldn't want to apply the light to the outside. I was working with a designer the other day and I said, look inside real quick, look inside that wall sconce. And she did, and there was a bulb. So we could apply the light, or sometimes you can apply it just to the inside of the shade. So it's not on the outside of the shade. So if you guys are finding that that's an issue and you want it to be consistent, try that as well. Okay. Alrighty, let me go back into render mode. Why don't I'm going to stop sharing my screen for just a second, and I want to take some questions from you guys, and then we'll go back and forth and answer some of those. So let's try. Hi, Birney. Birney's asking, how do you create elevations with accurate measurements? So this is not related to rendering, right, Birney? This is 2D elevations in the software. If that's what you're referring to right now, Foyr doesn't do 2D. Okay, great. Doesn't offer 2D elevations, but it is in the roadmap, and it is something that's going to be offered very soon. So it's very similar to like an AutoPad or something like that. You'll be able to create those 2D elevations. Donna Rich is asking, when I use conceal to conceal walls, sometimes it will wash out the room with exterior light. Does clip be positive? Okay, so yeah, Donna, I don't know if you saw what I was just mentioning about the difference between clip view and concealer, but concealer is like bulldozing the wall. Clip view is like you just have the magical ability to see through it. So clip view will not cause that flood of light, which is why I recommend using it for exterior walls always. And then concealer can be used for interior products or interior walls. Okay. Oh, you just answered my question, so never mind. I should have read ahead. Okay, perfect. Let's see now. Let's go to the chat because sometimes we get questions from both. All righty. Oh, I see you guys are adding some tips as well. That's awesome. I'm not sure if you're able to see these on your end, Tierney. Are you able to pull up the chat and the Q&A?
Yeah, I am.
Okay,
Yeah.
awesome. Casey Hodge, let me know if I answered your question with the field of view. Oh, I was supposed to do an outside and a custom environment. I'll show you guys how to do that. Thanks, Tiana. Alrighty. So Sally is saying, instead of adding down lights that you may have to Photoshop out, oh, the white light fitting. Okay, yeah, that's another option. That was like a sneaky tool I didn't even know about. And through the Foyr community and my coworkers, they're like, oh, just do that. But there's so many like,
yeah, that's great. Yeah, little sneaky things that you wouldn't know about.
That you wouldn't even know
Excited
about.
to use
Yeah.
that. I'm excited to use that one.
Okay, Casey, yeah. So I will show you guys quickly how to do a custom environment. Sounds more complicated than it is. It's not difficult at all. It actually starts in 2D mode, where we're going to draw a wall outside of our window. Oh, actually, I already have it here, so that's perfect. Let me share my screen real quick once more. Yes, Casey. So try bringing your field of view down and then just backing up using your mouse. That'll correct that issue for you. Okay. Alrighty. Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I have this window here, right? And we want to create like a custom outside environment. What we can do is you'll see I've drawn a wall here with two little like legs. Make sure that they don't connect, because if we join them to this corner, it's going to create a floor, which we don't want. We don't want a window over, looking out, and then you can see the floor in your render. So that's why I leave this gap. This is also going to allow some of the natural daylight or sunlight to come in through these corners here. But what I'm doing is I'm setting a spot to then custom upload a texture in 3D mode. So when we go into 3D mode, and you want to make sure that the wall is not too far away from your window, because then you're going to see this gap down here. But what I did, and this is just a picture of like the ocean with a sailboat. Move on down here. So you can kind of sort of see through this window in 3D. But you could take a snapshot of the outside of your client's space, right, of the window. And then you can upload it as a custom texture here. So are you guys familiar with custom texture uploads? You just save it to your computer as an image file, go to upload textures, find it in your folder. And let's say, I'm just gonna click on anything. Click open, and then it will automatically upload. And then what you do, so I have this boat picture here, I simply dragged and dropped it to the wall. So I did that first, and then these little legs here, because we're erecting a wall right outside of a window, it's going to block some of the light coming in from the sunlight. So we want to compensate for that. So I used that warm light texture. I applied it to these short little walls to make up for that blocking. And now when I go into render mode and I focus on this window, it's going to show this environment. So that's how you do a custom environment. It's kind of like a workaround, right? It's not maybe the most intuitive solution, but this is a way that you can create an exterior, a custom exterior environment for your clients. And you'll see I can turn it on an angle this way and that way without those walls showing, because I've kind of brought them far enough out from the perimeter of the window here. So just keep that in mind. Let me know if that answers your question. Alrighty. Awesome, Sally. Yeah, if it's too far away, it's going to show. Also, make sure that you delete the default baseboard. That's a dead giveaway that it's not real, is when the default baseboard shows up on your exterior wall. No problem. So yeah, definitely play around with the artificial lighting that we have available in the catalog and how you use that, because there's a lot of different applications for it, whether it's applied to the light fixtures or to secret walls or to wall duct cubes, to kind of create different effects. And make sure that you play around with your all of your camera tools that you have here, because each one has a very specific use to help you get that perfect render and that perfect angle. So Tierney, when you were kind of going through, when you're working, let me stop sharing my screen. When you're working, like, what is your, you kind of touched on this, but what would you recommend for designers to make this as speedy of a process as possible? So you said you try and keep it to like 2 renders per room. Do you have specific angles that you try and achieve for every room? Like, what does that look like? What's your formula?
I would say, yes, like my first, I always try to, I would say I have like a main render of each space where it gets like as much as the room as possible as I can show without, and I like you brought up distorting, like without distorting the space too much, but get as much in one angle. Like my client is kind of standing in the room, standing up, looking out. Then I just go through the lighting and try to get that, you know, the lighting down properly for the room that I'm in. And then of course, save the view. You don't have to go back through and do that all over again. Then I typically do, you know, just depending on the space, like some rooms I can show everything I need to show my client in one render. You know, there might just be a blank wall behind me, so they don't even need to see that wall. If it's a large room with a lot going on, I'll try to show at least one view for every aspect of the room. So it might be like 2 or 3 renders for the client to see the whole room. And then if there's some sort of special feature of the room, I'll do an up close, you know, of that area. I know I did an office one time. I should have pulled that. Well, I didn't know I would be talking about it, I guess, but if I would have pulled it up, I did, it was an office and there was a nice, beautiful table behind the desk. And I made sure to get an up close of the table, so that the client could see this was kind of like the feature of the room, and got that angle. But I would say just to, you know, if you get your lighting right, use the preview feature, save your views, and then take, you know, to get your other angles, take that first render and just sort of flip it around and then do that save as view to keep the lighting and everything the same. That's a quick way to get to that next view for the space.
That's smart. I didn't even think of that you wouldn't have to change your lighting in that case. You could just orbit your screen and then save view as, so that all of that work's already done for you. That's a really good point.
Yeah. That's a quick way to, keep everything consistent, not have to reset everything up.
Yeah, or be guessing what you did the first time and going back in. Definitely. And I like your point about sometimes incorporating detail shots where it's applicable. If you as designers spend time in like the staging and the styling process, maybe it's a bookshelf or it's a table, sometimes having those up close detailed shots is like a really nice, you know, extra, and really make the sale for the clients to be committed to.
Exactly. Yeah. Showing them those little details really helps them to envision the space and really know that it's going to be great, you know, once it's all done.
Yeah. And so do you typically shoot, which resolution do you typically use when you're presenting to clients as like a final product? Since there's HD, 2K and 4K, how do you?
I use the 4K. Typically I just love the clarity, and it just being like, it's the real space, especially because I focus primarily on e-design. That's all, you know, my clients are across the country, and that's really all they're going to see from me, before they get, you know, before they pull the rest of the space together. So they need to see as much detail as possible. So I do use the 4K option because it's it's just the most clear for them to see exactly, what it's going to look like.
Awesome. Yeah. And, all of the resolutions are great, but I also shoot in 4K pretty much exclusively because I just like that crispness. And to your point about taking like the two angles and not using all of your render credits or your credits on a single client, make sure that you're really getting the most out of the space. And that way you can afford to use a 4K render, which uses 3 credits, because you're not using, you're not taking 5 or 6 renders for a single room.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
I'm sorry, we just had one question pop up. Not really to do with rendering, no worries, Sally. But is there a way to do a vaulted roof with skylights without overextending the walls up to prevent the auto ceiling coming in? If you have skylights, you can see the walls outside. Okay, so Sally, I understand what you're talking about. If you add in skylights, go into the catalog, type in skylights, you're gonna find these are recently added. So there are a number of different skylight options with different amounts of windows that are at a slant. You can bring them in, and the window itself has a texture applied to it that looks like sky and clouds outside. So you're no longer, that's what's going to show in the render. It's not going to show that wall and that default ceiling anymore. So that should fix that problem for you. Be sure to check that out. It's not the most obvious when you're just looking at it that the sky and the sun is actually a part of the window. But that was a smart decision by the product team at Foyr to prevent people from seeing through it. No worries, Sally. Bye, Virani. Thanks for joining. All righty. So I'm trying to think if you guys have any more questions. Let me check the Q&A. All good. Have you ever used the invisible material tool from the texture catalog? Tierney?
I don't think so.
No,
I've made things clearer, like a window, but not, I haven't used the invisible texture tool.
No. Okay. So this is another tool that I had no idea existed.
I have never heard of this.
For a year. And then a coworker told me about it. So I'm going to blow everyone's mind right now. And hopefully you guys find some use for this. I'll share my screen real quickly. Okay. This is kind of a wonky room, I'm not gonna lie, but we'll just drag and drop. Let's say we have like a sofa from the catalog and it has pillows on it. We love the sofa, we hate the pillows. We want to place our own pillows and we don't want to use the one that the software has given us. I'll use this guy. I don't know if this has the pillow on it, but let's see. Okay, perfect. So you can go into the texture catalog, and sometimes this is useful for rendering, so it's kind of why I thought of it. Type in invisible, and you're going to find this thing called invisible material. Save it to your shortlist because you might find a use for it. Drag and drop it, and you'll see I've applied it to that pillow, and now the pillow, even though we can see the outline of it in 3D mode, the pillow will not render. So
wow.
Yeah. And now you can.
That's amazing. I had no idea. I will use this all the time now that I know it's there.
Yeah, this is why I love doing these webinars and like conversing with other designers, because there's always something that I learned from somebody else. Like your point about like, oh, just orbit the screen and then you don't have to redo the lighting. I was like, why didn't you think of that? Like,
yeah, no, I had no idea. I do this. I honestly, there are sofas that I don't use because there's pillows on them, and now I know I can use them.
Now you know, right? So there's like sometimes some things that by talking to each other, we always learn more stuff at the end of the call. So it's great to use. So use this to hide things away. I've used it on base cabinets where, or even like an accent cabinet where I like the cabinet, but I hate the hardware. So
that's what Sally just said. She uses it for handles on doors. That's perfect. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
My mind is blown and I'm so excited. I'm like thinking of all these possibilities of things I probably wasted my time with trying to fix.
Absolutely. Yeah. So go ahead, guys, and use that. Even though you can see the outline in 3D, it will not render. So don't worry about that. Awesome, Sally. Okay. Well, if you guys don't have any more questions, we'll give it just a second if anything comes up. I hope this was useful. Thank you, Tierney, so much for your time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Be sure to give Tierney a follow. Just type in Tierney Larkin. She pops right up. If you're starting an e-design business and you don't know where to start, reach out to her. And yeah, take it from there. But definitely let's all connect online.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, Vicky has one more question. Is there a way to have a personal shortlist for every new design? So the answer is it's coming very soon. Like I said, the software is getting a bit of a facelift in the next few weeks. And one of the features is going to be that you'll be able to share your shortlist across multiple projects. So if you have things that you use consistently, textures or products, you won't have to go back into the catalog and search for them. You'll simply import the shortlist from your other project and have access to it. No problem, Vicky. Alrighty, guys, you can access this webinar with Tierney on our YouTube channel to review, and otherwise give us a follow. Awesome. Thank you. Ryan has linked both of Tierney's Instagram pages so that you guys don't have to search for it. Thanks. Alrighty. Thank you so much again. And I will see you online. Absolutely.
Really yes. All right. We'll see everyone.
Bye.